Michael Edwards coming in as CEO of football for FSG, but also therefore for Liverpool, has huge implications on the club. Where we're going in the long run with our football, but also where the combination of FSG and Liverpool is also going. There have already been hints as to what kind of direction we want to take. So let's unpack a little bit of that on the channel and let me know down in the comments below what impact you think it has. Because of course, Liverpool are now looking for a brand new manager. We have been for quite a while, since we knew back in November and since we got it revealed just earlier this year. And so I think we all know that there is a big change to come. We all know that Michael Edwards was part of building the previous era at Liverpool. He signed some of our most influential players, people who arguably are in the all-time 11 for Liverpool, and also people who have just gone on to be fantastic squad players, fantastic value. He's also gone on to get value for us in the transfer market. So what does it mean when someone who's a football CEO and therefore part of board level or just below board level, because he does answer directly to John Henry, comes back in? Well, first of all, it means that there are some core principles I think that he always wanted to stick to at the club, which guided us through a lot of very interesting times, especially during times of growth, which are obviously good things to see back at the club. Now, like I said, there are a lot of signings, but I think there are also a lot of other principles that he was trying to adhere to and trying to get the club to go along with in that time. And I think it's kind of worth mentioning the elephant in the room, that by the time the relationship between him and Jurgen Klopp was there was a little bit of tension, allegedly, between the two of them. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. You won't always hear that tension at a football club is a bad thing. In fact, tension very often gets some of the best out of some people. But it was very clear that Jurgen Klopp wanted to have more control over elements of the club that Michael Edwards had elements of control over, and that Michael Edwards had felt, at least at that point, that he'd done as much as he could for the club if Jurgen Klopp was going to continue to be manager, which obviously he always would. And obviously, on top of that, if he wasn't going to have that control, what's the point in having Michael Edwards there, paying him a fat salary and all these kind of things? So Jurgen Klopp did take some of that control, and obviously the club has moved into a stronger area since then. We've had a couple of different people who've overseen football and kind of been the director of football in that time. Some have been good, some I think have just kind of been there as a stopgap, but until FSG can work out what was next, right? And I think broadly, you could say that Jurgen Klopp's transfer policy has been good for Liverpool in more recent years. In fact, he has signed players that he knows he can coach up to a certain level. And what's interesting about it is, I think you probably could say that, like, under other managers, we probably would be more critical of certain signings. Some people would have more ire on them. Some people would have more criticism surrounding them. We don't yet know where Cody Gakpo is going to finish up in his Liverpool career, what the rating is going to be for him. We don't yet know whether Darwin Núñez will be the next Liverpool manager's choice for striker. We know they're both quality, really high-level players who bring a lot to Liverpool because Liverpool seemingly have a high win record when those guys are in the team. But we don't currently know what Michael Edwards thinks of those guys, should we put it that way? Because there wasn't an element of consistency in this time. And yes, there are still some stalwarts that he brought in, Virgil van Dijk, Mo Salah, and there have been some really amazing players in that time, especially since the Michael Edwards era. But he's not going to be director of football. But we do know that his principles will still guide the team. And so Richard Hughes, the guy coming in under him, the guy who's been at Bournemouth and, had broadly a good Premier League record, because I think they have brought in a lot of value, seen a lot of value in the market, and also been able to realise a lot of that value. Now, very different sizes of clubs to run, but maybe with a little more resource, maybe with a little more finance, maybe with a little more, infrastructure around him, Richard Hughes can do something more. And clearly, Michael Edwards believes that to be the case. And I've got to be honest, I've kind of got no reason not to trust Michael Edwards. He left at just the right time. All of his career moves seem to be very good ones. Is he analytical rather than heart-driven? We don't actually really know, because he worked with Jurgen Klopp for a while, someone who was mentally the guy who forced Liverpool forward. Now, this is where we're going to see how much was Jurgen's doing and the coaching and all those kind of things, and how much was just broadly a great transfer policy mixed with really good players coming into a really good period in their career and realising their potential, because that is what Michael Edwards is there to, or was there, to identify. Now that is more of Richard Hughes' job, although he answers directly to Michael Edwards. And broadly, yeah, it's a good thing to see this guy back. He was good in the initial period. Is he going to be the same? Is he going to be able to realise the same value as he did before? Is the market the same? Arsene Wenger didn't always realise the value in the market. Other managers have struggled for value in the market. Pep Guardiola, in fact, whilst he identifies some of his transfer targets, isn't always the one that goes out to get them. And in fact, he isn't the one to get them at Man City. He says, yeah, I would quite like this style of player, but then Man City picked the players for him. Clearly, he's been able to realise some of that. But then that also goes the same for Liverpool. Michael Edwards was able to say, we should get Mo Salah instead of Urian Brandt. Broadly worked out pretty well. We've had a club legend and someone who's been prolific within his career at Liverpool, and that's been the same for quite a few different players. You wouldn't say, though, that that's only Michael Edwards, but Michael Edwards was also a huge part of convincing those players to come to the club, of making a compelling case for, hey, Liverpool is the place to come. It hasn't seemed as if the club has struggled in convincing players since to come to Liverpool. In fact, Cody Gakpo came to Liverpool after he left, and broadly, it seems as if there was a pretty compelling case that Liverpool made around coming to the club. Other big players have come in this time. Szoboszlai came, McAllister came. Clearly, they were convinced by the trajectory, but also working with Jurgen Klopp. So what is it that Michael Edwards can go out there and say in this time? Well, he can say, I've come back in and you can see my track record in the past, because that's going to be a huge part of the next summer with Richard Hughes and Michael Edwards going back out there, two very English names, sometimes get me a little mixed up. But the point being, like, both these guys are going to go back out into the transfer market and try and convince new people to come in, trying to convince certain players to stay. He's already said in his statement that he's going to want only the best people to come and work for Liverpool, people who match his ethos and the ideas and what he thinks the club represents. So clearly there is also that. And, you know, Michael Edwards is someone who is a big name. Chelsea wanted him to head up all of their football operations. Manchester United tried to convince him at one point. He turned down, or at least couldn't come to agreement with one of, if not both of those clubs at some point. So clearly he is sought after. He has had big conversations in Spain. He's had big conversations on the continent. He's had big conversations over in the States. These are all places where sport and infrastructure around growing sporting organisations is huge. He is clearly influential in the space. FSG have also struggled elsewhere, shall we say, in succeeding what has been great things. They won the World Series in MLB, but they haven't since replicated that. They have tried and they've trusted certain people, but it's never quite been the level that they needed. They have been close, but not good enough. And that maybe worries me a little bit, because it's very clear that Jurgen Klopp is a huge difference maker for Liverpool. He's someone who gets Liverpool over the line time after time. And, you know, it's very easy to say that. I think that's a real truism at this point in football, where it's kind of like, you know what, yeah, like, this guy makes the difference. And it's when you don't have a piece of analysis. My analysis would be, Liverpool have broadly made great signings, but we don't know whether those were Jurgen Klopp signings, which we broadly think they were, or whether they were club infrastructure signings, or whether a mixture of the two, and Jurgen Klopp has gone, I want this guy, and they've gone, yeah, that fits our profile really well, let's go and get him. Or whether he's going to want this kind of player, and they've gone, well, that could be that guy. And he's gone, yep, sounds good. It seems as if Pep Linders is also someone who had a big influence on that. All of these people who've influenced this thing at this time are going to leave a bit of a gap in that, and that is there for Michael Edwards, Richard Hughes, and whichever the next manager to come in is to fill. Now, that's pretty fascinating, right? Because if you think about it, Liverpool in itself is a massive, and I mean massive, project. Clearly, he understands that. Clearly, he knows the right phrases to say to tickle the belly of the fans, right? You say, I'm really excited to work for the club and all these kind of things. I'm not upset with that. I'm not upset that he knows what we want to hear. That's a good thing. But he also said that Liverpool will be working on acquiring another club in this time, and that will be obviously an FSG, but that means that that's going to be part of his daily role. That means that he's not going to be fully focused on Liverpool. But I'd imagine that his team will be big enough, and obviously if he is capable, which he seems very capable of, then he's able to manage multiple things at once. I just want to know what the benefit is to us, obviously, as fans. Obviously, it's good if FSG have a good time, we have a good time. But broadly, you know, FSG were looking at acquiring a basketball team at one point. They aren't at the moment doing that. They were looking at acquiring, more than just another American sports franchise. Do they have enough money for that? Do they have the backing for that? Do they have the ins for that? If that's not the case, and then more money is therefore put towards Liverpool, which can realise its value of around £4.5 billion at the moment, things like 4.3, then, you know, how are we going to grow our football operations? What is it that Michael Edwards sees at the club which is going to lead them forward? Why do it now and not 2 years ago with Chelsea? Why do it now and not 12 months ago with Manchester United? He was even had to be convinced to come back to work with FSG in the first place, but clearly they said something to convince him, and clearly it wasn't money or power, because guess what? He was offered a huge amount of money and power at other clubs as well. There is something else underlying all of that, and it must be, for a man who can literally pick his next job, something which makes the difference in the industry. Whether it's the fact that he can acquire another club, which might enable more around Liverpool. Bear in mind that City Group have a lot of clubs and have more recently enabled themselves to make easier transfers. I'm not saying that I want some sort of monopoly like they have, but if we can make it easier for Liverpool in the transfer market, then good. I want that, obviously. If it's also that he has seen a roadmap for Liverpool for the next 18, 24, 36 months, that is also a good thing. This guy just doesn't take short-term fixtures. He wants a long-term job here. He wants something he can grow. He wants something that obviously he can make a career out of. He's moved up to board level. When you move to board level, you tend to be a much longer-term employment than, say, someone else who might be in and out of a job, like a manager, like a player, like someone who's a director of football. Now, that then leads me to question Richard Hughes, who I will do a separate video on at some point, but some people say his road to this point is a little bit rocky. He did make some bookie signings, should we say, for Bournemouth, but at the same time, he made some great signings and has realised a lot of value. Does that mean that Liverpool are going to move into finding more value in the market and not going so much towards big signings? Does it mean that we can make some big signings, but also find value in the market? We are yet to find out. Richard and Michael Edwards are fascinating characters who I think are going to guide the club in the right direction and are an indicator that FSG understand where the club need to go. The next thing is to find a manager. Do you think that getting Edwards and Hughes indicates that we're going to get a specific kind of manager? Do you think it means that we're more likely to get Xabi Alonso or less likely? In my own mind, I don't know whether this is a big indicator at this point, but you might know something that I don't that I can bring up in a future video. And in the same way as Manchester United were thrilled to get all of their infrastructure in place, I think it's really important that obviously as fans we're looking into it and we are still interested. We probably wouldn't have known some of these roles before. I think maybe on the continent, some more people know the director of football, more people know who owns their club, and partially because English mentality is not to question the people at the top very often, we just don't seem to do that enough. So I think it's worth questioning a little bit of that. I also think it's worth saying Manchester United celebrated getting some of these things. I celebrate getting Michael Edwards back at Liverpool. I think he's a fantastic signing for the club. Bringing in this kind of infrastructure, bringing in these kinds of people, save your club a lot of money, but also make your club a lot of money, which means that then you can perform out on the field. They get good value, they find the right people, they get the right playing style out on the field. I'd be interested to know how much influence Hughes and Edwards have of the actual playing style of the manager and whether there'll be a consistent vision or whether it's something that over the next couple of years, we'll read into that. How much is it that we can see where the football style is going for Liverpool and how much of it is going to move towards the overall football meta, how much is going to try and go against that. Edwards can be a little bit sometimes counter to culture. So obviously he moves in other circles, different areas. Getting someone like Mo Salah was really weird at the time for Liverpool. Getting someone like Virgil van Dijk seemed like a fairly obvious move. But getting someone like Alisson also seemed like an obvious move for Liverpool. There's plenty of different ways that we can read this. I'll be interested to see whether he's changed much, whether he's learned much, and whether it will be different in this time of him leading the club. If you guys aren't already part of the Patreon, please get involved over there. And if you're not already part of the Discord, then please head over to that Discord and take a look because there's loads of people in there having great conversations already. Appreciate you guys looking in on this video, and in the next one, we will probably break down more of what Michael Edwards, Richard Hughes, and everyone else who is going to be involved with the club in the near future are going to bring to us. I look forward to hearing from you guys. Chat to you in the next one. Much love. Bye.